Longevity vitamins. Are they essential or not? In the research, they would be labeled as non-essential, but essential for long life. To me, that would make them essential because my goal and most humans' goals is to live a long life. So this is part two of a presentation that we started on last week's webinar discussing longevity vitamins and the concept of the triage theory. Now, what is the triage theory? For those who weren't on last week's call and haven't seen the video, I'll review it here for you. And the triage theory was put forth by Dr. Bruce Ames in a paper a couple of years ago. And the triage theory is this. When we are faced with a stress, there's two ways that we can respond. And remember, the stress response, the main purpose of the stress response is to promote survival for us. Okay. And you'll remember that when you're stressed, there's three ways you can respond. You could fight, you could flight, or you could freeze, right? That's the three F's, if you want to remember them that way. If you freeze, you don't make it typically because, if a tiger jumps out at me while I'm down at the watering hole and I freeze, I'm going to be lunch for that tiger. But if I fight the tiger or flee it or run from it or flight, then I've got a chance to survive. So, under stress situations or circumstances, survival is the goal of our physiology. When we're not stressed, then health or thriving is the goal of our physiology, right? And so that is things like the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, rest and digest, right? Things like that. Okay. And so thriving promotes longevity, the thrive physiology, whereas surviving is an adaptation made in the short term to save our life. Regardless, regardless of long-term consequences. Or you could say survival is a short-term adaptation to sacrifice longevity in the interest of living today. Okay. And so just because you're surviving doesn't mean you're thriving, of course. And oftentimes saving your life, pushing the death off to a later date, often brings with it suffering. Okay. And as we talked about last week, we've seen three examples of this. One would be the triage theory, as Dr. Ames puts forth, and we'll cover more today. Another example in physiology is chronic inflammatory response syndrome, where you may have exposure to mold or Lyme or bacterial endotoxins or beta glucans or actinomycetes, and those things drive chronic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction to the point where it causes what's called molecular hypometabolism, where the cell is having to make that choice to survive versus thrive. And so it chooses to survive, but with that survival, it's basically going into hibernation. And so you can't thrive, and it's kind of a chronic fatigue state. Okay, so there's suffering there, but at least you're alive. And then cancer would be another example of this triage theory. And remember that triage means to prioritize. So basically, what the theory is talking about is when we're under stress or we're not in a state of thriving, the body has to prioritize resources for as we talked about last week, the enzymatic processes that promote survival. And the priority is life or surviving. The priority is not quality of life or feeling good. So oftentimes, again, prioritizing survival brings with it suffering, but at least you're still alive. Cancer is an example of that. And I gave the example of lung cancer last week using a smoker, right? So if a smoker is smoking cigarettes for years and years, that constant smoking is exposing the cells of the lungs to carcinogens or cancer causing agents and basically toxifying the lung environment. So those cells have a choice. When that person is smoking, those cells have a choice. They could die today upon exposure to those toxins, or they can make the adaptation to a cancer cell so that they can live longer. And we are trillions of cells. As a trillion celled organism, we want to live. Well, so do our individual cells. So the individual cell is going to say, hey, I want to live, so I'm going to make that adaptation to cancer physiology. And if that kills the whole organism eventually, well, big deal. I care about myself, right? I want to live today. So they're making the short term choice to live, even though long term it's going to cause suffering and death, but at least they didn't die today. So that cell was triaging or prioritizing, hey, I want to keep living as long as I can. So I'm going to make the physiologic adaptation to these toxins that this organism keeps inhaling down to me. I'm going to adapt to those so that I keep living. And hopefully that adaptation buys the organism enough time to change their choices. In this case, to change their lifestyle habit of smoking. Hopefully they decide sooner than later to quit smoking, saving their own life and hopefully saving the life of that cell. So that is the triage theory. In times of stress or not enough, and by way of resources, we're going to prioritize our resources towards the things that will keep us alive. And this was, again, from a paper published by Dr. Bruce Ames on the triage theory. So let's go to that now. So this is the paper, and we covered this last week. And so, relative to vitamin status and healthy aging, Dr. Ames had published this paper and was talking about how, again, when we're under stress, the proteins and enzymes in our physiology that do all the work have to make the choice between survival and longevity. They have to triage or prioritize. Are we going to survive? Yes, we're going to survive at the expense of longevity. So, as proposed by triage theory, a modest deficiency of one of the vitamins or minerals can cause symptoms and push us towards a survival physiology, even though it's not an outright massive deficiency, just a modest deficiency. So we could say a functional deficiency and from a functional medicine point of view. So just because you're not completely deficient doesn't mean insufficiency isn't hurting you. And he talked about how we know that there's 30 different required vitamins and minerals for health, and they are longevity vitamins. Those are known that if we don't have those, we get sick and move towards death. If we have them, we can thrive. Well, today we're going to talk about the second part of his paper where he says there's conditional um, longevity vitamins and supposed longevity vitamins. And we're going to get into that here in a minute. But I just wanted to show you another paper that this was the paper on triage theory Dr. Ames put out where he talks about the 30 required vitamins and minerals for all people to be healthy. And we talked about those last week. Here's a second paper that's earlier, actually. Not necessarily talking about triage theory, but looking at the crosstalk between vitamins A, B12, vitamin D, K, C, and E status, and arterial stiffness. Now, why am I talking about this in a longevity presentation? Well, arterial stiffness is a decrease in cardiovascular health. What's the number one killer worldwide? Cardiovascular disease, right? So if we can delay cardiovascular disease, we're promoting longevity. So this paper is directly working with longevity because as our arteries stiffen, that promotes hypertension, high blood pressure, And high blood pressure promotes, the heart overworking and all kinds of cardiovascular disease risk. So this paper showed, hey, let's go down here to the highlights. Arterial stiffness is associated with cardiovascular risk, disability, and death. This paper reviews the main vitamins related to arterial stiffness and enabling de-stiffening, their mechanisms of action, etc. So again, we know if we're lacking these vitamins, that promotes our arteries getting stiffer and less healthy. And this paper shows if we're sufficient in these vitamins and actually optimal, then that enables us to de-stiffen or remove stiffness from our arteries. So it is reversible. And the paper goes on to say, these vitamins showed improvement in endothelial function, specifically vitamins A, C, D, and E improved the endothelium, which is the inner lining of your blood vessels, the lining that our blood is actually sliding over as it flows. If the endothelium is unhealthy, red blood cells can get stuck and you can promote clotting and obviously cardiovascular issues there. These vitamins improve metabolic profile. These vitamins inhibit renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. These vitamins are anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. They decrease homocysteine levels and they reverse calcification of the arteries. Vitamins A, B12, C, D, E, and K status is important in evaluating cardiovascular risk, and vitamin supplementation may be an effective, individualized, and inexpensive de-stiffening therapy. And again, arterial stiffness is part of the constellation of cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease is the number one killer. So if we can delay that, we are promoting longevity, and these vitamins delay that. Therefore, these vitamins are longevity vitamins. But what are the conditional longevity vitamins? That's what we want to talk about today. And that's what Dr. Ames talks about in the second half of the paper that we didn't cover last week. So this slide has two papers, one here that says conditional vitamins. This is further down in Dr. Ames' paper, which I cite right there. And then the second paper is right here, the role of phospholipid alterations in mitochondrial and brain dysfunction after cardiac arrest. And this image is from that paper. So first, let's look at the conditional vitamins. Dr. Ames says a conditional vitamin is synthesized by the body or made by your body, but it's not made at a level that is sufficient for optimal health. Okay, so conditional vitamins are vitamins we can make, but we can't make enough of it to be optimal. So we need these vitamins, but we need more than we can make. That means we have to consume them via diet. Okay, and the two conditional vitamins he picks out are choline and taurine. Choline was the first example of a conditional vitamin. Only 11% of women achieve the recommended intake, and the average intake for the population are half to two-thirds of this recommendation. So nobody in the US population gets enough choline. That's interesting. Why? Well, first let's look at what severe choline deficiency results in. DNA strand breaks in rodent models. Well, that promotes cancer. Alterations in epigenetic markers and histones. So that affects genetic expression, and it affects brain development. Interesting. None of the Americans get sufficient amount of choline, right? And they said choline is needed for brain development. Well, that's one way. So what do we see a lot of, especially in the last couple decades? A lot of neurodevelopmental disorders. We see a lot of ADHD. We see a lot of memory issues. And then in the elderly, what do we see? Dementia, to the point that Alzheimer's is going to cripple our nation financially by the year 2030 if we don't get a handle on it. And Alzheimer's is the seventh leading cause of death worldwide. Okay. Well, why does choline matter for that? Well, because short-term memory is what you lose in dementia, right? And short-term memory is controlled by the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain. And the hippocampus uses the neurotransmitter acetylcholine to function. And what you heard in there was choline, acetylcholine. If we don't have enough choline, we don't have enough acetylcholine. So hippocampus doesn't function optimally. That knocks out our short-term memory and leads to symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's. So we need choline. Where do we get choline? Choline comes from our diet. Eggs are a great source, especially egg yolks. And what does the conventional medical model and food pyramid and all those people tell you not to eat? Eggs. Well, if you're not eating eggs, you're not getting the best source in the diet of choline. And so now you're not making a phospholipid that is crucial to your cell membrane function of mitochondria, which every cell needs. And that can lead to brain dysfunction. And choline makes the phospholipid phosphatidylcholine. Okay, so if we don't have enough choline, not only is our brain suffering, but every cell in our body can be suffering, including our mitochondria, which are the parts of our cells that make energy for us, control inflammation and immune function, and all kinds of bodily functions. So getting enough choline is going to be crucial to health and longevity. And so again, it's conditional because we make some, but we don't make enough to be optimal. So we have to get it from our diet. Eggs are a great source. And I'll show you a supplement later that is also a great source. Now, the second conditional vitamin that he mentions is taurine. And taurine is a conditional vitamin because it is made by animals, including humans, but again, not in sufficient amounts. It's been shown to be important in preventing numerous health problems, including cardiovascular disease, number one killer, brain function, number seven killer, diabetes, and mitochondrial diseases. Because of taurine's extensive involvement in health problems that lead to long-term damage, it is proposed here that it is a longevity vitamin. Now, the rate of biosynthesis of taurine is species dependent, with a low level in humans. And this is what led to the suggestion that supplementation would be beneficial for humans. So we can make it, but again, we don't make it at high amounts and not enough. So we need to get it from our diet. Most taurine is acquired from the diet, mainly from fish and other seafood, seaweed, eggs, and dark meat poultry. Okay, well, most Americans don't eat enough fish or seaweed or seafood. And if they did, they'd probably be toxic in heavy metals or Japanese radiation or whatever else is in our oceans. Most Americans are scared of eggs because they listen to commercials and statin prescribers. And, more recently, for years, red meat has also been taking a hit in the media. So is it a combined effort to make us deficient in our longevity vitamins so that we enter the sick care system sooner and they make more money over time? Who knows? I can see it. Okay, so where do you get taurine? Most likely going to be eggs and dark meat poultry. Okay, so red meat will have some, dark meat poultry is going to be a good source. So the dark meat on the turkey, the dark meat in the chicken. So if you're avoiding eggs and dark meat, how can you get it? You can supplement with it. And again, supplementing with it supports your ability to prevent heart disease, brain disease, diabetes. And as it says here, taurine is particularly important in the mitochondria. Again, mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells, regulate inflammation and immune function as well. So if you have any sort of chronic fatiguing illness, taurine may be useful for you. So something to be aware of and to consider. Let's keep going. Those were the conditional longevity vitamins. Then Dr. Ames moves on and says, what are the putative longevity vitamins? And putative are supposed longevity vitamins, and he lists a couple. Ergothioneine from mushrooms, PQQ or pyrroloquinone quinone, quinine, and carotenoids. Carotenoids you've heard of, such as beta carotene in carrots, lutein, astaxanthin. The carotenoids are often promoted as helping with vision and preventing vision loss. So again, these are longevity vitamins that he walks through, and he says here, I propose that many of the known vitamins and minerals have, besides the survival function, age delaying or longevity functions. I also propose that other dietary biochemicals not officially recognized as vitamins or as having age delaying functions have a positive age delaying effect. Within this category, vitamin C is categorized. Vitamin E is a fat soluble free radical scavenger that is also included. Okay, so the four putative longevity vitamins: ergothioneine, also known as ESH. ESH is present in the human diet. It's made in most mushrooms, also made by certain cyanobacteria and soil bacteria, but not by plants or animals. Okay, so if you're avoiding mushrooms, you might not be getting enough. Various plant foods contain small amounts of ESH taken up from the soil, and animals that eat such plants contain ESH in their flesh. So we can get it from plants and animals if they're taking it up, but it's not made by them. ESH has been shown to be present in almost all human cells and tissue types, often at millimolar levels in the brain, bone marrow, lens and cornea of the eye, and red blood cells, where it appears to play a significant role as an antioxidant. Its levels decreased significantly with age past 80 years old, and significantly lower levels were found in people with mild cognitive impairment. So again, mild cognitive impairment is a precursor for dementia. ESH is present in high concentrations in mitochondria. So are you seeing a theme? If you want to live a long life, you got to have healthy mitochondria. All the longevity vitamins support mitochondrial health. Dysfunctional genes related to the ESH transporter gene are associated with Crohn's disease. So ESH use may be specifically helpful for people with Crohn's. So that's mushrooms. You can get it from mushrooms. Again, the edible fungi synthesize ESH to varying concentrations. You can get highest amounts in oyster mushrooms and king boletus mushrooms, and lower levels in white button mushrooms, which are the most commonly eaten ones. So if you go pick up white button mushrooms at your grocery store, you're going to get some ESH, and that's going to help promote longevity. Moving on to PQQ. This is made by bacteria, but not animals or plants. It's made by soil bacteria and enters the plants from the soil and enters our diet by us eating those plants. It was detected in every sample of fruits and vegetables tested. It was detected in those fruits and vegetables at levels 5 to 10 times higher than what's found in human tissues and fluids. It's a powerful antioxidant and much more stable than the ascorbic acid form of vitamin C. And it has 20,000 potential catalytic uses in our body compared to just 4 from ascorbic acid or vitamin C. So what's that mean? Vitamin C and PQQ are both antioxidants, but you only can quench 4 free radicals with vitamin C. The same amount of PQQ will quench 20,000 radicals. So it's a much stronger antioxidant for us. The health benefits of PQQ in humans include for diabetes, antioxidant activity, brain protection, cognition, and lowering inflammation. And, drumroll, they improved mitochondrial efficiency. So again, long life, healthy mitochondria. Queuing I will skip over because there's not a good supplemental way to get this in that I'm aware of on the market. It is made by bacteria and will pass it on to plants and animals. Its detectable amounts have been identified in tomatoes, coconut water, and milk from human cows and goats. So, I guess if you're going to eat some tomatoes and coconut water and maybe some human milk, cow milk, goat milk, you get some. So I guess tomato is going to be your best bet there, and coconut water. And a deficiency in this promotes a deficiency in BH4, and BH4 is needed for conversion of phenylalanine to tyrosine and tryptophan to serotonin and tyrosine to dopamine. So a deficiency in this can in fact impact you cognitively. And lastly, carotenoids. There's over 600 carotenoids, and these are made by plants, not animals. And carotenoids are what give plants their bright colors. So red peppers, yellow peppers, orange peppers, purple eggplants. One molecule of carotenoid can destroy hundreds of molecules of singlet oxygen. So again, they're very powerful antioxidants. Your lutein, your astaxanthin, your beta carotene, So low intake of carotenoids has been associated with all-cause death, macular degeneration of the eye, and associated blindness, cognitive decline, heart disease, various types of cancer, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, hearing loss, decreased visual acuity, inflammation, immune decay, and brain decay. So some of the health effects upon their deficiency may be due to insufficient vitamin A. So again, those are the four longevity vitamins as Dr. Ames sees it. And the mainstream will never mention them to you if you're looking to optimize your health and your longevity. But as we've seen today, they can be very important, and they're all very important to mitochondrial health. And mitochondrial health is key to optimal health, no matter how long you're living. So stacking these with the conditional vitamins, choline and taurine, promotes optimal health and longevity. So where can you get these? You can get these anywhere supplements are sold. My online store is right here. You can get them there. I've created a separate little template where you can pick all three of these up together. Taurine, PQQ, and the ESH from mushrooms. You could get them all. You could get one. Remember that they all support healthy mitochondrial function and they all support longevity through different mechanisms. One product I did not put on this slide that I promised to tell you about is the phospholipid product. So the phospholipid product that I like that includes the phosphatidylcholine, right, that we talked about, but also the four other key phospholipids is called Bio PC Pro. And that is by Orthomolecular, a company called Orthomolecular. So you can find that on the store as well, or you can find it, however you go find things. So thank you for being on this call. And remember that just because you don't have symptoms doesn't mean you have optimal levels of the longevity vitamins, the conditional vitamins, and the putative longevity vitamins. Remember, we said early on in Dr. Ames' study that just a moderate deficiency promotes dysfunction physiologically. So we want to have optimal levels. And as we talked about last week, the recommended daily allowance or the estimated average recommendations set by the government are all far too low. And you can see that implicitly by looking at the US population, seeing how unhealthy it is on average. So if you want to be above average and have a healthy longevity, then you have to do things that are abnormal to the normal population, like take supplements, take therapeutic doses of them, even when you don't have symptoms. So I'm Dr. John Bartemus. This is educational purposes only. Please speak to your provider before you add any of these to your lifestyle. And thanks for being here.